What's up, everyone? I'm James Lynch. In today's video, I'm going to build out my UFC 300 card, fights that I think make sense for this event. And first, let's look at the fights that are officially confirmed for this card. Going to be taking place April 13th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It's their 300th event, so you know they're going to pull out all the stops. So right now, we know that Yuri Prochazka, Alexander Rakic is going to be happening. Calvin Kattar against Aljamain Sterling, the former bantamweight champion, moving up. And we've got Bo Nickel against Cody Brundage. I already did a video on those fights already, gave my thoughts on that. So this is what we're starting with. Obviously a lot to go from here on out, but I wanted to actually first show this graphic of a fight card that I've seen popped around on social media. Someone made this. I apologize, I don't know who actually made this proposed UFC 300 event, but I've been seeing this float around on social media, and I think some of these fights make a lot of sense. There's some I don't like, but let's go first through the card that I think makes sense for UFC 300. And again, I factored in a number of different things. I factored in the fact that you're probably not going to see a lot of Muslim fighters on the card because of Ramadan. You're not going to see certain fighters compete like Paddy Pimblett. I know he's having his child around then, so certain fighters like that were excluded. And just know I did my best. I kind of looked at the rankings and thought, okay, what makes sense? What's going to draw? What are some fights that might work out the most? So let me first tell you, there's some fights on here I don't like at all. First one I don't like is Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. In my opinion, Adesanya should not be getting a title shot at light heavyweight. I know he has the knockout win over Pereira last year, but he's coming off a loss at middleweight. You shouldn't get a title shot just because you beat a guy in a different weight class. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. So I don't think Adesanya should be awarded that. Not to mention the last time Adesanya went up, he lost. So no interest in seeing that fight. Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway is an absolutely fun fight, but I just don't think Gaethje should take that fight just because, in my opinion, he's done enough to get himself a title shot. I know people will disagree with that, but that's just how I think. Not to mention, if I'm Holloway, I wait to see what happens at UFC 298 between Volkanovski and Topuria. If Topuria wins that fight, you've got a fresh title fight for Max Holloway. So there's that. Dustin Poirier, Nate Diaz is a fun fight. I don't think Nate Diaz is going to come back to the UFC. I just don't see that happening. I think he can make more money outside the octagon, even though that would be a fun grudge match. No interest in really seeing that. And not to mention Poirier coming off a loss. Like, don't really want to see him fight Nate Diaz now after him getting knocked out. And I have zero interest in Tony Ferguson, Nick Diaz. Like, I get people thinking, okay, we want like a throwback, like veterans fight, but I don't know how you watch Nick Diaz's last fight and Tony Ferguson's last fight and think, yeah, you know what? I want to see these guys fight. I don't. And especially not on a pay-per-view, I don't want to see this fight happen. So no interest in either in that fight at all. So let's get into the card that I have proposed. I'm going to explain why bit by bit. So make sure you pay attention here because I know people are going to argue as to why I picked certain fights. So let's go with this. Okay, so I've kept the main event exactly the same. I think McGregor and Chandler, say what you want about Chandler. I know he's not everyone's most favorite fighter, but they had an entire Ultimate Fighter season. I would like to see Chandler and McGregor take place. If for some reason Chandler can't go, maybe you put Gaethje in that spot. I know I just said Gaethje deserves the title shot, but Conor McGregor sort of the exception to the rule. If you can get that Conor McGregor payday, I don't think Gaethje would mind that. That would be an option too. Either way, we got to see McGregor headline UFC 300. I know people will disagree with the fact that it's, a title fight or a non-title fight should headline UFC 300, but in my opinion, it's Conor McGregor. He should be on UFC 300, and I don't have an issue with him being in the main event. So McGregor Chandler is the fight I'd like to see. Let's just see these guys fight and compete, and let's see what happens. And at the time we're recording this, December 26th, we're hearing rumblings that the UFC and McGregor not getting along too well. They're having trouble booking him a fight, so this may not happen. But let's assume that they can book McGregor on this card. McGregor Chandler makes a lot of sense. Okay, next one, Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill. So I swapped out Israel Adesanya for Jamal Hill. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor, don't have a medical degree. I'm hoping that Hill's going to be ready in time for April. We haven't heard otherwise. We haven't heard that there's any setbacks or that he's going to be out longer than this. So if Hill's ready to go, I'm absolutely down with him getting this shot and doing this grudge match. There's a lot of history between these two back and forth online as far as, this matchup coming to fruition. This is just pure violence if this fight takes place, Pereira and Hill. Now, if Hill can't go, the other option you could possibly do is Magomed Ankalaev, but like I mentioned off the top, a lot of the Muslim fighters do not want to compete during this time because of Ramadan, so maybe Ankalaev doesn't take it, but maybe he changes his mind. I don't know, but Ankalaev would be the backup option there if Hill can't go, and I do think Ankalaev beats Johnny Walker on January 13th, so that would be another option there too. If either of those two are ready to go, then I would just take Pereira off the card and have him fight at a later date. I've heard rumblings about Pereira and Tom Aspinall. I don't think that makes sense at all. Pereira just won the title at 205. Why is he getting to move up and fight for another belt potentially? I mean, even if the belt's not on the line, I don't want to see Pereira at heavyweight. He's a light heavyweight. He was a former middleweight. Why are we seeing him move up? I'm not in favor of a Pereira-Tom Aspinall fight. especially with the fact that you take that risk of Aspinall getting knocked out. It could happen. I know Pereira, again, weight classes are there for a reason. I don't know if Pereira could actually do it, but I think no interest there in seeing Tom Aspinall. And speaking of Aspinall, you could take Aspinall off that UK card and possibly put him on this card against Cyril Gahn. That's another option as well. Again, just thinking outside the box. It's really coming down to what options are available. So that makes sense. You could do Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gahn in that card. That could make sense too, but no interest in Pereira and Tom Aspinall. That's the rumor out there. The other option you could do is another title fight on here is Weili Zhang and Yan Xiaonan. That hasn't been officially booked. You could also do Juliana Pena against the winner of Myra Silva and Raquel Pennington. Not the most popular choice, but at least then you get another title shot on there, a title fight. And I would imagine Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko will not take place in April. I think they'd be saving that for the UFC Noche card, but we'll see. That could be another option too if you can't do Pereira against Hill. So just went through a bunch of different scenarios, but I think, if Hill's healthy and Pereira's ready to go, that fight makes sense. Okay. Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. So this would be for the middleweight title. I am assuming that du Plessis beats Sean Strickland. So it could be Strickland against Chimaev too. It doesn't matter. Again, Chimaev, I know, is also Muslim, but he has expressed interest in fighting at UFC 300. I think they could possibly make it happen if they want to go that route. Again, if Chimaev can't go, you could bump one of the other fights I mentioned as well. It doesn't matter if it's du Plessis or Strickland. I think du Plessis is going to win. So you could do du Plessis and Chimaev. You get the middleweight title on the line. I think that could make some sense there too. Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad. Again, Belal, same thing. Muslim, might not want to fight on this card, but it's been hard for him getting a title shot. He might not have a choice. And if I'm the UFC, I'm putting this title fight on this card as opposed to the UK card because I don't think you'd want to have a UK card headlined by Belal Muhammad and Leon Edwards. I just don't think it's going to do well financially. Maybe you put Aspinall as the main event and that as a co-main event, but I still don't see an issue why you can't put Edwards and Muhammad on UFC 300. You get another title fight there. It's long anticipated. You could also do Leon and Shavkat Rakhmonov, but I think that Belal definitely deserves the next shot. So would like to see that as well. But I don't think it hurts putting Edwards and Muhammad on this card, the welterweight title fight on this. And then I would have Shavkat as the backup for this fight too. So again, like I said, Chimaev, Muhammad, those are two that I could see not fighting because of Ramadan, but Bilal's fought for fights before during Ramadan as well. So I'm going to use it as an option just based off that. And then we've got Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan. Again, I didn't put Islam on this card because Islam, he can kind of pick and choose when he wants to fight. I don't think they're going to force him to fight at UFC 300 if he's partaking in Ramadan. So this would then leave, an opening for Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan. I know the UFC has wanted to do Oliveira and Arman. That's the, that's the rumor right now anyways that we're hearing is that Oliveira and Tsarukyan could happen. I would then go Justin Gaethje and Islam for the title and do Oliveira and Tsarukyan, and I'd be fine with this because I think with Arman, it would be good to see him get another win here. They both have finishes over Beneil Dariush. I think with Oliveira, and I've said this before, I think he needs 2 wins to get back to that title fight with Islam. So this is a good test. Tsarukyan's the future. Oliveira's the veteran at this point. I think that fight is awesome, and what a fight to open up the pay-per-view. Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira doesn't get much better than that. So that's again a fight that I would include there as well. I like Cody Garbrandt and Dominic Cruz. Whoever suggested this before, I'm totally down with that fight. I think that's a fight that Cruz would actually take. I think one of the reasons we haven't seen Cruz in the cage for so long is because they've probably been saying, hey, do you want to fight Umar or do you want to fight these up and comers? And Cruz is probably like, no, but maybe he wants that fight back with Garbrandt. And I think he may think like I think, which is that I don't think Garbrandt's back to being this contender just yet. Knocking out Brian Kelleher doesn't exactly tell us much. So I think do the rematch. Their first fight was great. Would like to see the rematch there. Obviously, Yuri and Rakic is already booked. You've got Sterling and Cater already booked. That's fine. Hooker and St. Denis was another fight that was proposed. I think that fight makes sense. You want to give St. Denis a higher ranked opponent. Dan Hooker's available. Let's hope he's ready to go in time. There may be an injury issue there right with his arm, but I think if Hooker's healthy, that fight makes a lot of sense either way. St. Denis against some ranked opponent, whether it's Jalen Turner or Hooker, someone like that, I'm totally down with. So I think St. Denis got to be on this card. The guy always brings violence. I threw in Colby Covington and Sean Brady. I don't know if this fight will actually take place if the UFC can convince Colby to fight someone like Sean Brady. Colby wants to fight Wonder Boy. I personally don't want to see that fight. I think with the UFC and Colby Covington, you got to know, what are you getting out of Colby Covington going forward? He's 35 years old, coming off a terrible performance in his last fight. I think at this point you use Colby to build someone else up, and that someone else would be Sean Brady, who put on a great performance himself over Calvin Gastelum. I think that's what I would do if I'm the UFC. Honestly, I think the UFC should have done Covington and Ian Gary. You get two guys who are, not that favorable by UFC fans these days. And whoever wins that fight is gonna, again, you got two big names there, Gary and Covington, but obviously Gary fighting Jeff Neal instead. But yeah, I think Brady and Covington makes sense. Style wise, it's an interesting fight. And hey, for Colby, if he goes out there and wins this, it gets him back in the good books, beating a guy like Sean Brady, who's an up and comer. So I think that makes sense. I know it's crazy to say Colby Covington on the prelims, like would he even accept this? But I don't think Colby has a lot of leverage right now with the performance he had at 296. So I think him and Brady makes a ton of sense. I would way rather see that than him against Stephen Thompson. Rose Namajunas and Amanda Ribas makes sense. I think Rose is much better at 115. She's coming off a tough loss at 125. Again, I think just, who's available right now, I think that makes a lot of sense. I would have totally been down with Rose Namajunas and Tatiana Suarez, or Rose Namajunas and Amanda Lemos, but Ribas is the only highly ranked opponent that's available. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then obviously they booked Bo Nickel and Cody Brundage as well. So that is set in stone too. But yeah, just looking at this poster, this is kind of what I think could work as far as matchup goes. And I know there's a bunch of other names out there, like I mentioned, like Max Holloway, and there's just a ton of other fighters. There's a lot of different ways to go, but I tried to keep a couple things in mind. You want a couple title fights on there. So on this current card, we have 3 title fights with the light heavyweight title, middleweight title, and welterweight title. You've got like a really fun, like kind of, and Oliveira's a bit of a draw too. So you got him and Saryukin. That's like a fun fight to open up the pay-per-view. I think the prelims are good. And then, again, Covington Brady would be fun. Can Colby come back? If he can't, then, Sean Brady gets a nice rub here from fighting Covington. Rose Namajunas can bounce back here against Ribas. Ribas has been a bit up and down, although nice win in her last fight. And then Bo Nickel opening up the card is just spectacular too. So that's kind of where I'm leaning here. So again, this is just based off what we have now, kind of speculating a bit. This is what I think makes a lot of sense. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. What fights would you add to this card? What did you think of the original graphic that I showed you and the one now? Are there some fights you want to see that you don't want to see? Do you want to see Gaethje and Holloway? Do you think Gaethje deserves... I think Gaethje deserves a title shot. That's why I wouldn't put him against Max Holloway. Obviously, that's a fun fight. You've got, I don't want to see Tony Ferguson and Nick Diaz. I'd love to see Nate Diaz back in the UFC, but I don't think it happens. So I just kind of picked what I think could be realistic in terms of fights. And I'll say it again. I know Duplessis and Strickland are fighting. They might beat the crap out of each other, and neither of them are going to be ready by April. That could happen too. But let's assume that there's not going to be a ton of damage in that fight. I think Duplessis turning it around in a couple months to fight Chimaev for the middleweight title. Again, the UFC doesn't wait for anyone, it seems, so they could maybe put that together too. So yeah, let me know what fights you want to see added to this card. Again, just kind of going off what's available and what's not. Let me know in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.